Okay, so we're going to talk about circumference and arc length. Okay, so circumference and arc length. For circumference, you need to understand that the definition of circumference is the distance around a circle. It is the same thing that perimeter is with any kind of a polygon, but for circle we call it the circumference. And arc length I'm going to come back to in just a little bit. So the distance around a circle. There is a formula that says circumference equals either 2 pi r or circumference equals pi d. We know that the diameter is twice the radius, so that's why diameter equals twice the radius. So we're just interchanging those two. So if I'm working a problem trying to find the circumference, if I'm given the radius, I'm going to use this formula. If I'm given the diameter, I'm going to use this formula. You guys have heard of pi before. Pi is, if I solve this for pi, if I have c equals pi d, I divide both sides by diameter. That's what I get. So pi is a circle's circumference divided by the circle's diameter. Okay, and typically we think of it as being 3.14. There's actually a pi button on your calculator. So if you're using one of mine, it has its own little button right there. Okay, so if I hit it, oopsie, if I turn it on, if I hit it, you're going to see a whole bunch of decimals, 3.141592654. I would highly suggest as you're working to not just use 3.14, but instead at least carry it out to the 3.14159. That way you are getting answers a little more accurate. Okay, so that is how we find circumference. So if I give a circle circumference, so let's do example 1. Circle D has a circumference of 18 centimeters. Find its radius. So I have circle D has a circumference of 18 centimeters. Find its radius. So I'm going to use the 2 pi r. So the circumference equals 2 pi r. Solving for the radius, so that means I need to divide by 2 pi. I know the circumference is 18, so I have 18 divided by 2 pi. Let me start that over. 18 equals 2 pi r. Divide both sides by 2 pi. The 2's cancel out, pi's cancel out. I get a 9 there. When I cross cancel, so I have 9 divided by pi. 9 divided by pi. And I get 2.86. And that would be centimeters. And that is rounded. If I asked for, let's go the other way. So if I have, sample 2, if I have a radius equals 5 inches, find the circumference. So I have the circumference equals 2 pi r. Circumference equals 2 times pi times my radius, which I was given is 5. by the circumference equals 10 pi. I'm going to stop there for a minute. So it'd be 10 pi inches. This answer right here, when you leave it in terms of pi, this is called an exact circumference. So if the directions say exact circumference, you simply do not multiply through with the pi. If it doesn't say exact circumference, then I would take my 10 times my pi and get 31.415. I cannot believe I just used a calculator for that. 31.42, we will say, and that would be inches. Okay, so if it says exact circumference, you leave it with the pi in it, the answer with the pi in it. Okay, now we're going to talk about arc length and how it works with circumference. So if I have a circle, and I tell you that the radius is 3 inches. And I want to find, let's say that this is 40 degrees. So my central angle is 40 degrees. Let's talk quickly about arc measure. So arc measure equals the degree of the central angle. Okay, so if this is a central angle, which it is because it's at the center, if this is 40 degrees, then this arc measure is also 40 degrees. I go over here and I make this like 120 degrees. Then this arc measure is also 120 degrees. Do not confuse arc length versus arc measure. Arc measure is in degrees. Arc length is in a lineal measurement. I'll put unit, lineal unit, like centimeters, inches, feet, etc. So if I want to find out how long this is, okay, so I'm going to clean this up a little bit. So if this is 40 degrees, and this is the 3 inches, if I want to find out how long this is, right from here to here, think of this as I'm finding a piece of the circumference. So arc length is a piece of the circumference. Okay, so if I know the whole circumference and I just want a piece of it, then I'm going to use a formula for arc length. So if this is 90 degrees, and this has a radius of 6 feet. So in order for me to find the arc length, I need to find the circumference first, or the total circumference. So circumference equals, I have the radius, so 2 times pi times r. Circumference equals 2 times pi times my 6, gives me 12 pi. 12 times pi gives me 37.70 when I round. Okay, 37.70. And this is going to be feet. So I don't want the whole circumference. So think about if I were to take like a piece of yarn and wrap it all the way around the circle, and let's say that this is 37.70 feet of yarn. I don't want all of the yarn I want this much of it. So a lot of people will see that as a quarter. So I'm looking for a quarter of it or a fourth of it. So I'm looking for the arc length equals 1/4 of my 37.70. So 0.25 times 37.70. And I get 9.4, we'll say 425. My arc length equals 9.425. Okay, so that means if I had this piece, it's 9.425. If I were to extend this out, this would be 9.425, 9.425, and another 9.425. So all total, that would give me the 37.7 or 37.70. You're not always going to have that nice, neat fraction. So 1/4, we need to figure out where in the heck did this 1/4 comes from. And it comes from the arc measure divided by 360. So how much of the circle do I want out of the 360? Well, it's 90. So this one's 90, so that means this arc measure is 90, which gives me my 1/4. So let's say I don't have something nice and neat like that. So I have a circle. And this is 80 degrees. Okay, so I have a circle and it's 80 degrees. Get this situated here. Okay, and I know that the radius is 4 inches. So I just want to know how much is this arc length right here. So my arc length equals my arc measure, which is 80, over my 360, because that's the fraction or the piece of the 360 that I want, times my total circumference, because that's what this is. This is circumference. So I have my arc length equals 80 over 360 times my circumference is 2 times pi times my radius of 4. So I get 80 over 360 times 8 pi. I could chuck all that in my calculator. I know that both numerator and denominator can divide by 10. So that's going to get rid of those zeros. So if I multiply straight across, I have 8 times 8 times pi and divide that by 36. So my arc length would equal 5.59. And this would be inches. Okay, see if our answer seems reasonable. That is going to give me my circumference. So 8 pi is 25.13 rather. Okay, so 80 goes into 360, a little more than 4, not quite 5. Well, that's the relationship I have here. If I take this times 4 or 5, it's going to be really close to that 25. So my answer is reasonable. So arc length equals the arc measure divided by 360 times the circumference.